After making the series about connecting FL-Digi to the FT817 with Linux, I've received a number of requests on how this can be done with WSJT for FT9 and JT65, showing the same degree of granularity with the same steps. I figured that was a natural progression from FL-Digi, so I decided I would put this movie together and show how that was done. If you're interested in seeing how it's done with FL-Digi, take a look at the link above. I'm going to start off with some of the parts again. All of the parts are the same that I have used for FL-Digi. None of this actually changes. I have the Y cable with the extension. My speaker, it's a Bluetooth speaker, but it also has an input. I have obviously the FT817. That is my antenna analyzer. I have this cable here. This is my data cable, a simple data cable. Does transmit and receive to the back of the FT817. And this is my CAT cable. This CAT cable from the previous video is also a 9-pin serial. So I also have a Linux compatible serial to USB converter. I will also mention, as I had in the previous video, that there is also such a thing as a data cable that also has a hardware CAT built in, so we could see the input and output connections here for audio, but we also see a USB connection here, and that is for the hardware push to talk. So I'm not going to be using this cable. It's nice, hardware push to talk with an indicator light. This is something that I would generally use for like APRS or packet radio, but again, I'm not going to use it here today. I'm going to go with the simple cable and use the CAT-based push to talk. Our first order of business has us connecting up the appropriate cables. This first cable is the one with the headphone jacks on it, our data cables, and this is going to plug into the data jack right here. The second cable right here, this is the CAT cable with the 9-pin serial on the end, and that is going to go into the ACC jack just like that, and we're finished. I already have my ground connected, and I'm going to plug the antenna back in, which I just removed, so I was able to display this, obviously, as well as the power. Now plug that 9-pin serial into the serial to USB converter, just like that. Finally, I'll drop the serial to USB converter right into the laptop. Now I've connected my data cable. We could see here that the blue is the incoming from the radio. This is the receive, and this is going straight into the microphone jack. The other side is transmit. I haven't connected it yet, just so we could see that that one was transmit. I left it out. And transmit is going to the green, which is to the radio, right? So WSJT can generate transmit signal. It's also splitting off and going to the USB speaker so we can hear transmit when it is transmitting. In order to get the latest copy of WSJT on your Linux system, you're not going to be able to use apt. The repository is just way too old. So you're going to need to go to their website. I will include this link below for you to click on. So you're going to go to this website, and what you're going to do is you're going to scroll down, and we're going to see at the time of this video it is 1.8. So if you're seeing 1.8, you know you're good. And we're going to see that under Linux, or whatever version of operating system you're using, this video is for Linux, we're going to click on the appropriate deb file. I'm using a 64-bit version of AMD. If you have a 64-bit system, if you don't have a 64-bit system, then use whatever's appropriate for you. So if you're using 32-bit Ubuntu, click here, 64-bit here. Fedora and Red Hat have their own variants, and Raspberry Pi actually has its own variant here. So I'll just download that now. And once it is downloaded, I will now proceed to install it. I've moved the downloaded package to my desktop, so I'll just double click on it. It should open up software install. Now mine is already installed, so I click the install button, type in my password. Guess it lets me install it again. But now I'll hit the launch button. And I'll verify that I'm still running the same version and not the one from Canonical. I'm sure it's 1.8. And we can see indeed, I am now up and running with WSJT-X version 1.8. So we are ready to start some configuration. We have a little more work to do for the USB serial device before we get started. This is a piece that a lot of people forget and leads to a lot of frustration. We'll just get right into it. I'm going to open up a terminal right quick, and we're just going to jump right into sudo, so we have super user access. So sudo -s, and then type in your password. Your account should have sudo access on your own Linux distribution. If you don't, then you're going to have to Google adding yourself to sudo. That's going to be beyond the scope of this discussion. We had earlier plugged in the USB serial device, and we're going to type in DMESG. I'm going to make this window just a little bit bigger so we can see that. What I'm going to do is just because the device isn't on the bottom here, just to make it easier to see for the video, I'm going to unplug the device and plug it back in. This is not necessary, but just something I'm going to do. And we can see that the USB device disconnected and then it was reconnected, but this is the most important line right here. We can see that the PL2303 is attached as TTY USB 0, right? So if I go and I type ls-l dev TTY USB 0, we will see it's owned by root, but it's in the group dialogue. At this point, it's important that if we're going to run WSJT as a non-root user or as yourself, you need to be added to the dialogue group, or you're not going to be able to issue cat commands to the radio. And this is one of the reasons why people have so much trouble. So we're going to do this now. So what we're going to do is we're simply going to type add user, the user who we're going to add, in this case it's me, right? Dial out. We'll see that in my case, it returns an error saying that I'm already a member of dial out, and that's just fine. For somebody else, they'll be added to that group, and now that individual will be able to access the serial interface, TTY USB 0, and other serial interfaces. So I've gone and reset my configuration to factory default in the hopes of emulating the experience of installing a new version. So I'm going to load WSJT-X now, as anybody else would. I don't know if you get an icon on your screen or what. I use a different bottom bar. And this should be factory defaulted. So I'll just go right down to settings. And yes, we can see that this is factory defaulted. So the first thing that I want to do before anything is I want to put my call sign in. So I'm going to do that. And then my grid square. Right? Those things are done. And then I'm going to move over to the radio section. And for the radio section, obviously, I'm going to choose the FT817. Incidentally, clicking Y will at least take you to Yaesu. Then I will choose the serial port DEV TTY USB 0. I will choose the baud rate that aligns itself to the baud rate on the radio. I will tell you right now that it is set for 38.4. So I will set mine for 38.4. Push to talk method, I will set via cat command as discussed earlier. And now I will click test cat. So here are the settings that I have selected for the FT817. I will admit that it did not initially work, and I had to actually exit out. And when I started the program again, the radio jumped to my memory saved local repeater station, which is actually, I don't want to say it's memory saved. It jumped to the VFO for 2 meter, but then all of the functions worked fine. So I'll run now the test cat, right? And we'll watch that. And that is but a flash. You can just see a quick flash on the radio. But the button does go green. And now test push to talk, which you'll hear on my 2 meter radio right next to this, a couple feet away. Right, so push to talk is working as well. So these are the settings that are working for me. Again, I'll say that it was a little bit quirky because when I put these settings in and ran testcat, it failed. So I said, okay, cancel, exit, and then went back in, and then it all worked fine. So it looked like an initialization issue with HamLib and not the configurations themselves. So I wanted to point that out. If you run into this problem, then you know, hit OK. And it's actually what it was OK that I hit. And then I got a message that said that the radio configuration didn't work, right? And then I exited. And then when I came back, it worked. And actually what we're seeing here, the reason why it's on 147.120 is that WSJT actually used the default select operating band for this radio at 2 meters. And in my 2 meter band on this radio, 147.120 happens to be the default for the radio. That's just what's in that VFO. So if I jumped to something like 20 meters, we can see the radio shifted now to 14.078. So it appears to be working just fine. The next setting to look at is in the audio tab. I have found that by default it's using the ALSA input and output, and they're both set to mono. Both of these seem to be just fine. There's no need to adjust this to anything else if you're not having any problem transmitting or receiving. Should there be a problem, this is something that can be revisited. After that, you should go to the reporting screen and click on Enable PSK Server Reporting. That way you can use PSK Reporter and other people can use PSK Reporter as shown in some of my other videos and benefit from this.